Now this is the sandpaper that Mark had donated to our illustrious cause here. And what I wanted to do today, I've been waiting patiently for the BIMOTA so this paint would cure to its full hardness before I did this. I didn't want to rush this because this is going to be the final step in this process. But this is 2000 grit, and I wanted to give this an absolute fair test. And I wanted to take paint that is fully cured, not paint that was only a day or two old. I want to sand all of these BIMOTA parts out, and this is, I mean, this job has been so many hours in the, even just waiting for the right paint to come in. But this will give us a real test as to how this is going to play out. And this sandpaper, when we go to buff Mark's and both Mark's and Glenn's bike, this is going to be a big, I think, a giant asset, a real time saver. And I found it to be just way better than the sandpaper that I was using, the inexpensive stuff. And it's actually better than the 3M stuff, which is really top dollar. So luckily we stumbled upon something that I think we can use to our advantage. Let me just show one little spot here. We don't have to belabor this. It's all stuff we've done before, but it's probably the one area of painting that's the most mysterious or the most confusing, or I'm not sure. Never sure of anything with paint. Paint can make you crazy. Anyway, let's just try to do this step by step for the benefit of our friends and people that are interested in such things. And what I would suggest, anybody that's really, really into this in a high-tech way, these videos that I've watched out on YouTube, AMMO, AMMONYC, they seem to have a lot of good information. They seem to have this down pat. And it seems like a lot of the stuff they do is relatively expensive. But if you're going to buff cured paint, everything should look like that to begin with. So what I'm going to do, off camera, do the whole rest of the part, get the whole part to look like this before we move on to the next step. And that's probably going to be a half hour, 45 minutes. Oh, our sandpaper worked great, by the way. Now here's what I wanted to do is just show, here's a little spot. I want to show the little imperfections that we're going to still have to get out right there. Here's one right here. There's a shiny spot. So this is, once it's dried up, you'll see these little spots. I was showing Glenn yesterday how to go about picking away. Now it just takes time. See, here's one up here, that little shiny spot. When we go to buff, we'll be buffing and buffing and buffing, and that thing won't come out. Well, it's a lot easier to get it out with the 2000 grit sandpaper. And by the way, this sandpaper is absolutely beautiful. I know I'm ranting and raving and going on and on about it like a teenage kid, but that one's gone. Okay, this shiny spot we had here, gone. Now, I'll look around, and what I call, and I've explained to Glenn, it's called candling. Here's another one up here. Because we really want these to be perfect. See, there's a little spot. Now, that's just a wet spot. Let me work around here, because this is stuff, this is absolutely the trick of tricks. This is the difference between if you go to a bike show and the person that wins and the person that's in second place, these little details. If a judge knows how to pick away at paintwork and find all the little shortcuts and mistakes, all right. There's one down there. Now I get very, very, very fussy because to me, this is my passion, is to have a paint job that's as good as I can possibly make it. And the second thing is to share the information so people that want to do this in their own garage or over their own winter, they have the choice of doing it. And I thank everybody that's put information out on the internet. I have found a lot of bogus information, but I found a lot of good stuff too. Now, it's time to get out the compound and give this a shot, and let's just see what we got here. Now what I wanted to do, I wanted to just pass on some information. When you get impatient and you try to rush a job like this, a lot of people resort to using things like 1500 grit sandpaper. Yes, you can sand this with 1500, but then you've got to get out the 1500 scratches. Well, they make a product that's just, I call this the shortcut product. I mark it because this I would only use if I have a scratch. This in itself will bring up the finish, but it takes a lot of material off. At the time it's getting rid of those scratches, it's taking a lot of your material off. What I much prefer in the very beginning, 80-21. It'll take you a little longer to do the job, even if you do it by hand, because there's some parts of this job we're going to have to do by hand. You can't get a buffing wheel down into certain spots. Now, a couple of the things that I found, and I wanted to show this in real time, not in some time-lapse photography, or which I always criticize people for doing stuff like that. Let's put the part over here. I'm not even going to use a new pad yet because I want to get everything cleaned up. I want to get it, and this is just one way to do it. There's a million ways to paint. There's a million good ways to paint. It seems like a lot of people come up with their own system from years of working on stuff. Remember, I've been doing this for a lot of years, so I've developed my own little idiosyncrasies, which an example is, and this is just one example, worth knowing, worth understanding. If you invest in a lot of expensive equipment, a spray booth, for instance, you will have less sanding. You'll have what took me about an hour will probably take you 45 minutes. But you're still going to have to sand it. You still don't, the finish never comes out of the gun buffed. That's the bottom line here. So what I want to do is just pick a spot at random. And I never want to do this. I never want to just hold the thing in one spot. I want to constantly move it, nice and slow. This is going to be time consuming. By the time I do this whole panel, and I've got 4 panels to do, maybe I'll get them all done today to see how the day plays out, or what time our babysitting obligation starts and ends and whatever. And it changes from day to day. Now what this is going to tell me is if the paint is ready for buffing. Because this is really a lightweight compound, and I really don't think it's critical what compound you use. Now when Glenn buffs the Kawasaki out, we're going to try to make a totally dedicated video, because I'll have 2 people here. And he's got some expensive buffing equipment that'll probably work a little bit better than my equipment. Maybe. But it's not the equipment that matters. It's not who has the most expensive frying pan, it's who has the best hamburger. And we pride ourselves on having some pretty good hamburgers. And I've always laughed when people that have been to the shop for the first time, they say, oh, where's your spray booth? Where's your $1,200 spray gun? Where's your, all these exotic things, you know. If you saw my compressor, you notice I never showed a compressor on TV. Okay, so what I can see almost immediately, we're ready to buff out. That's ready to start. So the next step is going to be to just hammer away at it. And this part of it, no matter how you do it, it just takes time. Now once I get to the point where I'm kind of happy with the way the paint is polishing up, the next thing is to detail this out, make sure I don't have any of those little imperfections in the paint. And when I'm all done, I'll get a nice coat of carnauba wax on this so it protects it when Vlad puts the bike together, and you never can tell when you're putting a bike together, parts, you drop them where they don't fit or whatever. But I'm totally thinking that that's a part that I think he's going to be real happy with. And there's a lot of labor goes into something like this. And I don't find the materials to be ultra critical. I've found plenty of different compounds that work. It's just that the products that I've shown seem to work a little bit better than most of the other ones. But they all do work. Well, we got one of the 4 panels done, and I'm looking at this one. This one has fewer imperfections in it, but now a lot of times, and I know what a lot of people are thinking right now, why not just take the buffing wheel and buff it out? Well, and I shouldn't say you can't do that, but the job, the overall quality of the job, you still have those little specks of dust, which I guess are minimized if you do have the luxury of a spray booth or not painting on a windy day or a $1,200 spray gun or something. But in my case, I've never found, and unfortunately I wish I could find it, a shortcut to this wet sanding operation and the polishing. And any number of, we wear out inexpensive buffers and we use up a lot of material doing this, but I still think the end result, when you're done with this finish, and it's not like I invented it, but it's the way I've used for probably 50 years now. Think about that, 50 years. Where were you 50 years ago? I'm not sure. And I just want to emphasize once again that Glenn has been learning this skill, and he's getting better and better with every time we do something together. We're going to be doing his Kawasaki soon, probably within a week. But this is the whole thing in a nutshell. This is the secret. A secret trick of tricks is you've got to turn this, what looks shiny and has little imperfections in it, to flat. And then once this is buffed, you have got something really special. Now I thought I'd mention another thing too that comes into this. If you're setting up a shop or you're figuring out a place where you want to work and do this kind of work, where you're looking for paint flaws, your best bet is to use fluorescent lights. Fluorescent lights show the flaws in paint many times better than using incandescent light, or many times, and certainly 100 times better than sunlight. So what happens is if you have a flaw, a tiny flaw in the paint, and you're looking in sunlight, you'll never see it. Which probably, most people probably don't want to see the flaws. But when you're picking out flaws, if you do incandescent light, you see too much reflection. And what happens, it masks over all these little areas that are a problem that you really want to get out. So what happens when you're doing this kind of finish, you want to pick out all the flaws under these conditions and make it look good under fluorescent light. Because when it looks good under fluorescent light, trust me, you take it out in the sun or put it under incandescent light, it's going to look perfect. And that's a good trick. That fluorescent light trick is a serious good trick. I'm good. We're not trying to paint today because, boy, the wind is blowing again. But I wanted to just show, this is the end result of a lot of labor. A labor of love, so to speak. But at the end, boy, I'm telling you, when this bike is all put together, this is gonna stand out in the crowd. I've said this before, if this isn't the nicest BIMOTA ever, then it's Vlad's fault because he didn't wax it. So go buy yourself a nice big thing of carnauba wax because you're going to be using it, baby. Now basically on these parts, it's very similar. We want to be very careful. There's a lot of sharp edges on this, but I want to do the same thing. I want to flatten it all down. Step number one, flatten it, flatten it, flatten it. Once it's completely flat, I'll have to buff this very, very carefully because there's a lot of sharp edges here. I don't want to catch an edge. I don't want to pull a paint off an edge and have to touch it up or redo it. Now I've heard, and from several people I know that are in the body shop business and they've worked with paints and in the aircraft industry and stuff. And I've been told, yes, you can buff this paint the next day. 24 hours later, you can buff it. And I've tried that. The paint is still a little soft. Well, probably the reason is because I put a little more paint on than most people. I mean, some of the jobs have so many coats of clear, they get to where you sand it and get rid of all the defects and everything. But the bottom line is then you have enough paint on that 10 years later you can rebuff out the whole project. And it's not a problem now. This is flattening right out. And then we're going to basically just repeat the whole process over again. Now, because of the complex shape of this part, what I'm using is a black pad on the big buffer. See how soft that black pad is? This is made for final finishing, for waxing and such. And what I'm doing is just putting on the final finish using this. I want to show this the objective of the soft pad. This is a hard pad. The hard pads are good on nice big flat like the hood of a car. But these pads, the black ones, are really useful for, and the waffle pads are even good, for getting in little nooks and crannies, like in here, to get around there and get all that buffed out. So once this is polished up, let's see how close we are on this one. Now this part is going to be, this is going to be beautiful. And we take that out in the sun, that is going to look like a piece of jewelry out in the sun. Now pretty much on every job I've ever done, there's always little spots that's really inappropriate to try to get a machine to go. In here, it's not going to really work out with a machine, and I'm afraid here's what happens, what can happen. When you stick the machine in here, let me just show this. I don't want to turn it on, but sometimes this edge of the plastic will chew up the paint, and then it's like you hit the reset button. So, and I wanted to make everybody aware of, years and years ago when we did model planes, we buffed the whole thing by hand. Now, we don't buff motorcycles by hand, but the point is you could do it by hand if you wanted to. It just takes a lot of time and a lot of elbow grease. But all these modern polishers and waxes and everything do just such a wonderful job. It's just unbelievable how nice it comes out. Another thing I was going to mention, because I want to put all this on these buffing videos for people that really do want to know this stuff. One of the things you'll learn early on is don't wear jewelry. You notice I never ever wear jewelry. And yes, I do have my my fake Ferrari watch and my fake rings and Super Bowl rings and everything, but the reality is this kind of work, and I'm always wearing soft pants when I do this kind of work. Soft t-shirt, soft pants, no big belt buckle, no big Western Roy Rogers belt buckle or anything. So these are just some of the things to think about, because right now if you start chipping away at that, it can be a real problem. You can ruin many, many hours of work. And how do I know? Because I've done it myself. Now, I also find it's handy for me sometimes, and this is the case right now. Right now, I want to do this edge. It's always easier with the smaller buffer. And I can use my knee for a support. So here's what will happen. If you start buffing this and you're out in midair, this just starts dancing around. If you can use your knee for a support, wow, it just makes it that much easier. And needless to say, all the clothes you wear, the minute you're done buffing this stuff, put 5 times the amount of laundry detergent in them, and don't wash them with your wife's favorite clothes. In my case, we keep a separate load just for work clothes, because the stuff is usually pretty gritty, pretty dirty. But it looks like today we're going to be able to finish up the buffing on this, find out when Vlad's going to be able to pick it up. And I really look forward to seeing this bike. I hope Vlad's going to get some nice pictures of it. put them out on the internet or whatever. And it will be. When this bike is all together, this should be something pretty special. That is really one more step. And this is a step you don't want to leave out, believe me. This is, as I did some research on microfibers, I was wondering, I had bought some in AutoZone and bought some in various other places. And I never realized why some of them were a lot better than others. Well, microfibers themselves are a whole other topic you can look up on YouTube and find out, but I did find out that some of these thicker ones really work a lot better in terms of what I'm trying to do now is put a coat of carnauba wax on this just to protect it while Vlad is going to be putting this all together. And I'm really the BIMOTA project goes back for a long time. Vlad had a lot of problems getting matching paint. We had a lot of issues that took 3-4 times the amount of time we originally allocated for this project. And what's happening now is we're coming up on the end of the season where we normally work in the shop every day. My grandson is going to be here basically all summer, so we're going to try to finish up as many of the projects as we can. Try to get the cellar cleaned up so he can have basically a playroom. And we'll be starting our projects again probably in the fall around November. And I hope you've enjoyed. I really hope you've enjoyed, especially this BIMOTA project. It's been a real adventure. And I hope maybe you've even learned something along the way. Maybe something you can share with your friends. You can share the videos or whatever. I enjoy the sharing part of it. And this is just one thing. If you don't know about wax, carnauba wax is the only stuff that to me is really worth putting on there. But if you get an idea of what that's all about, this project, Vlad, I have to tell you, has it is a labor of love. And as much as I've enjoyed doing it, I'm going to enjoy seeing you ride this bike this summer. And so that really finishes up what has been a great adventure. But actually all of the projects we work on this shop, Glenn's will be the next one. We'll hopefully be able to finish that in a week or two. Mark's NS Honda. We've done a lot of bikes for Luciano over the winter, one for Vince, among other things, and of course our own little collection of stuff. And I really think this winter has been very busy. We've painted a lot of stuff, we've worked on a lot of stuff, we've shared a lot of stuff, but it's been an amazing, to me, an amazing adventure. And I'm always happy to share the passion we all share of motorcycling and actually of life itself. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you've really enjoyed sharing this BIMOTA project, because you will not be seeing it on our videos again until Vlad sends some pictures of the bike all done. But thanks again for watching.